yourselves to the panel and what you expect to get out of this panel. We'll start with Destiny.
Hi, I'm Nikolai. I'm hoping to get information to help my students out if they're struggling with stuff. I'd like to have resources.
I'm Rin. Could probably see if I can take some stuff from my mundane job, which is deals with a lot of this stuff. So, and then yeah, same type of idea, just to see what I can pick up to help my people.
Thorwolf, I'm looking to add resources to my palette of working with people.
I'm Tulia, and I'm hoping to pick up tips to help me do things like not keep my eyes shut through a whole fight.
I'm here to learn things I can do for teaching behavior.
Hi, I'm Allard. I'm looking for some advice for myself and also to share with fighter tech.
I'm Katie. Looking for advice for myself as well. And then Argyle and I teach at a university club, so hoping we can get some information for that as well.
Argyle, and I want to be a better teacher.
Oh, Justina, kind of rare coming down here, but I stopped fighting because of the PTSD related to SCA combat specifically. So I thought maybe it would be useful or incredibly triggering and I'll cry. But my mascara is really nice, so we'll stay on.
I'm Lee. I run a practice up in Portolo, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anything and hopefully learn some new things for some of the new fighters that I deal with.
And for our newcomer that just walked in, we're doing introductions.
Hello, I'm Thaddeus. I lived in Green Mountains. Is that? I just.
Well, you're in Dragon's Myth now.
Dragon's Myth. Okay. I was up in Thorn. So. Yeah.
And our two lovely camera people. We want introductions for you too.
Oh, hi. I'm Raven, or Allegra Governor. I'm doing the cameras, and I'm going to be fighting later. I'm mostly just here because of camera.
I'm Nick. I'm Ravens.
Should we do an introduction on our panelists?
Yeah.
I'm actually not a panelist. I'm Tamsin. I am here to go, hey, you got 10 minutes until we have to go? This is our head Casper. Yay! Hi, I'm Helga. I'm from the West Kingdom. I have a couple forms of traumatic experiences in my universe, both combat related and not. I'm non-military, but I grew up in a very interesting house. Is the best way to put that. I have also dealt with and been lifelong with combat veterans that have dealt with PTSD on the field and off the field. I am the person that if we have a PTSD episode occurring on the field, they grab me because I have dog mom voice, like motherfucker. So that is the reason why I'm on this panel, but to talk about how we deal with it and stuff that our students face while they're coming back, especially reintroducing combat sports when you have a history. I will say, if you do not feel comfortable disclosing what your history is today when you're asking questions, just say that. Everybody's very respectful here, and we've had a couple people already say that they struggle with their own issues. Please do not feel that you need to be on the spot to discuss that, and if you want to discuss after, where you can give more detail, also please feel free to come up to any of us, and we will keep that confidence for you.
I'm Edward Ian Anderson in the SCA. I was raised in 25 foster homes and 5 adoption homes, and my PTSD started when I was 4. And on top of that, I went in the United States Marine Corps when I was my 17th birthday and spent 2 tours in Vietnam. The SCA has been my outlet for my PTSD because of the camaraderie. And hopefully we can treat PTSD and the other forms of traumatic abuse that happens not just from combat veterans, from bad relationships, from bad being raised improperly, and stop thinking of it as the person being broken as having the person having their eyes open to a scary world. And they continue to be scared. So our job as trainers is to reduce that environment.
I'm Gregorio Cristovalez de la Vega. I have a PTSD diagnosis as well as an anxiety disorder. I also have several decades teaching fencing and historical combat arts to a variety of folks, many of whom also live with PTSD, some of that physical conflict related, some of that emotional conflict related, so a number of different presentations of PTSD within that.
So I get the short introduction, I guess. After all these really impressive resumes. I'm Valentine L'argent, and as they say, I went to the other side of the world and saw some things, and have spent a lot of time around a lot of people who were pretty banged up one way or another. And honestly, I think almost all of the students that I've ended up teaching were recovering from something in one way or another. And I'm a huge fan of doing whatever we can do, any of us, to help the people around us, and especially the folks who come to us for education and training, to move forward in whatever path they choose, however much they choose.
So, is this the panel for how bad childhoods turn into peerage?
Right. Well, PTSD, any one of the mental ways of looking at the world, can be a motivating factor or a disability. It's how we treat it, and it's how our environment helps us treat it. Okay. My second tour in Vietnam, I got lucky, and as I was flying into Da Nang, I was sitting next to this chaplain the whole way over. And just before we landed, he turns to me and says, because I was stressing on him, you know, I didn't want to be here, I just been on emergency leave, and he turns to me and says, you know, the reason that you're stressing, the reason that you're all upset is that you think you have no control of the situation. And that's where a lot of people feel after these traumatic events, is they have no control over the situation. And he turned and he says, but the actual fallacy of that is that in any situation, there's only two ways to come out of it. You can either come out of it better for it, or you can come out of it bitter for it. Okay? And our job as trainers in the SCA in particular, in our fighting, is to give people access to the better way. If they have a bad fight that triggers them, okay, what do? Well, you calm them down. We know that. Okay, you calm them down by talking to them, reducing their heart rate. Remember that anytime a heart rate gets up, it's also part of the flight response. So when you first start somebody that has PTSD and you know it, the very first thing is heavy exercises may trigger them. So bring it up slowly. Get them used to the idea that this is a game, this isn't a real life incident. That person that they're fighting is not their enemy.
We talk about it as playing Mario Kart.
Yep.
Like, you get to play as many rounds as you want, it's Mario Kart. Yeah. This is Mario Kart with bruising.
There's no limit to the number of times you can be resurrected.
Yeah.
That's the great thing, you know, you don't have to put another quarter in.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that, one of the pieces to that, for me when I'm working with a student or just a random fighter who is winding up, is we think about, for example, the structure of turns, right? Pretty much anybody who's worked with, who I've worked with long enough has heard me explain that the overwhelming majority of the people who enter any given tournament are not going to win it. Right? Simple fact. So, lower the stakes. Right? Find other things. You may not win a fight, so what?
I redefined for me that turned my fighting around in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, was that if we go to a tournament, you're going to have one winner, right? If we define winning as the last person standing. But what if we define winning as having a good time?
Victory conditions is what we call it.
Victory condition.
Oh, yeah.
If you define winning as having a good time, and you instill that in your students, that going to a tournament, having a good time, and learning something is the win.
Yeah.
So how does that affect your PTSD-based students? Like, also, you haven't gotten to do your introduction yet.
Hello, and I'm so sorry I'm late. I drove up from Salem as fast as I could. 2019 at Ontario West War Fair, excuse me. I hope what he called it master's training. Anybody? The way it worked, I hate competition. I despise competition. I cannot stand seeing the look in everybody's faces that did not win. It destroys me, right? And that is definitely part of my PTSD. So the way it worked was 10 points possible. You told the judges which master you were trying to emulate, and 3 things that you were working on within that mastery. For me, they were not stepping backwards, every strike is also a block, and something else, whatever it was. If you try, 3 judges, when you tried your thing, one of those 3 things, you got a point for it. If you tried it in an appropriate situation, you got another point for it, and if it was successful, you got a 3rd point. If you won your match, you also got a 10th point, right? 10 points possible. The winner was the person that was closest to what they were striving to do. When you fought, if you lost, there were just no points. That 10th point simply wasn't awarded. They were not adjudicating your opponent. It was round robin. So there's the only person you're fighting on the field is yourself. It was glorious. It was wonderful because everyone there is only helping you get your points, and when you are challenging, you're only helping them get their points. You're setting everybody else for success.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. It was an amazing experience, and I wish I could do it every day.
I really enjoyed a tournament that I was in. I looked at the field and I was like, there's 100 people here. That means I've got 1%. So I picked a B goal, and my goal was to make everybody that I fought laugh once. So I'm dancing in between fights, and I'm catching people on the line and telling jokes, and I'm spinning my sword over my head, all these stupid things. And I scored like 80%. That made my day.
So how would you guys on this panel describe addressing your potential PTSD triggers in a tournament format then? And how you ID potential triggers for your students in a tournament format?
With the range of PTSD triggers being so broad, I wonder if that's not the responsibility of the individual person. Certainly.
That's the question for you and your students, because that's the taking on the responsibility within the relationship that you guys develop, and yourself. So like, how do you ID some of your triggers in a tournament setting?
Therapy. Therapy.
Yeah, 100%.
Have we talked, I'm so sorry I'm late. Have we talked about what PTSD actually is? That it's an inability to process something that happened in the past, and so you experience it limbically as though it is occurring in the moment. Those triggers can be so broad and so tangential, right? Anything can set it off. For me, noticing what my students' trigger is not as valuable as knowing how to ground back into that moment and how to care for it.
To answer your question, for myself, my biggest trigger is when I think my opponent is not playing the game. When my opponent goes from the game to this is real, That's my biggest trigger. If I think my opponent is playing a game, and we're playing Mario Kart, then these are the rules, this is the way we play it, everything is fine. But the minute we step over that line, if this is a real life experience, and that trust has gone away, then past learned experiences come forward.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to learn, and for me, that's when I have to walk away. Because if I don't, one of us is not walking away.
Yeah.
Okay. For you as a teacher, you have to constantly educate yourself. You have to constantly be observant of your students, of the people around you. If they're not going to share things, these are individuals that have gone through traumatic events and had their eyes opened to a scary world. When you're in a scary world, you don't share things. That's hard. But the SCA, because of our camaraderie, because of our ability to be brothers and sisters and cousins and aunts and uncles, and we create a family of trust, we draw people in that have been in that environment. Because none of us want to be constantly on guard. It's stressful, it's hurtful. We don't. Our brain forces us to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reason I have shepherds.
That's the reason you have shepherds. But in honesty, we don't want to be there. So we're going to try to put ourselves in situations where we're not, where we can trust the person around us so that we can relax. But that trust comes hard, and you as a teacher need to build that trust.
Yeah.
By being open, by being listening, by giving them control of, one, their fight practice.
So I'm going to put a sticky note on that one, because that is definitely something we should talk about, is IDing how we build trust with our students.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like, besides, like, I'd like to go through the triggers and how we each individually deal with triggers, but how do we openly build trust with our students so they can communicate to us that is something is going on? So are you cool holding that for a moment, and then we can go back to that? Because that's a really good topic, and I feel like we should probably actually take some questions here on that one. So like, do we want to go over like how you ID some of your, I mean, if you're comfortable discussing it.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. So for me, the nature of my PTSD hits in two ways. One is around one of the angles doesn't so much affect the fighting field, and that's around manipulative behavior. The other, but it's something that I have to, that's one that I have to be on the lookout for in my off the field life, which of course also feeds into past appearance and things like that, just a little. But the other revolves around perceived sadism. So when I'm in a situation similar to what you were talking about, when I'm in a situation where it clicks over in my head that this person either wants to hurt me or this person wants the win bad enough that they are willing to hurt me to get it, right? When my head cues into that, my anxiety spikes, right? For me at this point, with the help of a very significant amount of therapy, I've gotten that to where I would say probably 75% of the time I can step back, cycle a few exercises through my brain, drop my breathing, pull my heart rate down, and step back in. And so the key there is recognizing when I'm in the other 25%. Right, which is usually, if I can't get that down in just that quick clip through the mechanisms that I have loaded, then it's like, oh, yeah, okay, we're done now, right? Usually don't have to do that, but it's a thing I have to keep an eye on, yeah.
I guess in a lot of ways I got really, really lucky, and so almost none of my PTSD stuff comes up in fights or tournaments for SCA stuff. But I do pay a lot of attention to the folks that I'm teaching to try to watch out for that. They call it an OODA loop, and how far there are in that thought process.
I love that you just used that term. I'm so excited.
What was the term again? Can you repeat it?
So the term is an OODA loop. It has to do with a continuancy from I'm not paying attention to the world to there's something going on to there's a lot going on to there's probably too much going on until I can't even process anymore and there's nothing going on because I can't see the world. Yeah.
Yep.
And there's a lot of it's a whole class because it can be used in a lot of ways for a lot of functions. But catching the early stages, being familiar enough with the people that you're around, with general signs and symptoms, as well as with the specific for the people that you're working with and around, and yourself, can you watch for those markers, and you start paying more and more attention and doing what you can to help somebody push back down the line so they don't continue to crawl up that scale.
Yeah.
And some of that's purely familiarity. And some of that is honestly, is just paying a lot of attention, especially when you've got somebody, oh, there might be something here. Really gonna have to watch that. And yeah, I'll throw the whole rest of practice just to help somebody who's not having a good time kind of control where they're sliding on that scale. Because some things are way more important. Longevity of somebody there is way more important than how well they're doing that day.
All right, so do we want to go, so do you have more on this one?
Yeah, actually, so I noticed that in myself, there are 2 PTSD responses that I have. Hey, I got multiples. Overachiever. So either I become hypervigilant, right, and I'm scanning the environment and I'm ready for a threat. And in those cases, I need to do some mindfulness exercise that refocuses on myself. That could be tapping, mindful breathing in for half as long as I breathe in for half the time that I exhale for, and try to get that longer and longer. Breathe in for 4, exhale for 8, breathe in for 5, exhale for 10, etc. Or I go in too deep and I get focused on myself and my needs, and I can't. I just learned this word and I was so happy to learn one. Alexithymia. Anybody? Want to guess? Alexithymia. Means you can't talk. Means you get so focused that you can't make words anymore. Maybe you can make eye contact, probably not. It's one of the ways that I check myself. I'm like, I'm super stressed. And in those cases, I start thinking bigger and bigger and bigger to reground myself, right? Imagining myself in a cosmic context. Yes, this moment sucks, but if there was an omnipotent God or an alien looking down on me, would they think of me as the worst person ever? Probably not.
That's a solid one.
And and so one of the things that helps me in that is to run drills. Particularly, anybody longsword? Just me. Yeah? Particularly winding drills.
Yep.
And I love that you mentioned the dream, not being in the game, being in the dream. Has anybody considered the connection between REM and EMDR with eye movement? Right?
Oh yeah, no, there's a direct correlation.
Yeah. So when I'm doing winding drills, it means I'm stepping offline, and to do that, I'm stepping as far offline as I can, which means my eyes are tracking left and right, and I'm focused on my body, or I'm focused on my opponent, depending on which one I need to do.
So, part of my job is like work with people with this situation. And I get a lot of aggression responses, and one of the things that I'm working on with my guys is how to set up. Like all of you basically described, I have this procedure when this starts to happen to me.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think would be really useful for us to talk about would be how you guys develop those sequences that you have once you've been triggered, and do you guys find it useful as the teachers to be like implementing it? Like, do you kind of go, okay, so my student's got a stress response to this. So do you guys like to kind of go up and go, okay, so your stress response is this. I suggest we try this. Let's see how that works, succeed, fail, blah, 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 and learn. Or do you want them to do it like themselves and then tell you? Like, what do you guys feel as both people that have been the person that's teaching it? What do you guys feel is like a good way to do that?
Can we come back to that one?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
The building trust.
The
is
building
built
trust
right into
is
that.
100%.
the very first step.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll go through mine really quick. I don't have the shutdown response, by the way, which kind of sucks. I only have the fight response. I literally had the shutdown response beat out of me as a child. So now if I shut down, I almost freak out because I'm just like, this is not a response I am used to.
Yeah.
And so my trigger for telling myself that I'm anywhere is I stop feeling pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could beat me half to death and I will stand right back up, because that's what I was taught to do. Like, it didn't matter. You stood back up and you finished that fight. And so if I get hit in a tournament, and it can be like the weirdest thing, I can get hit in a tournament and be like, I don't think that was good. And I'm like, that was good. I guarantee that was good. And I'm out. And I'll just go pace the Eric. But I came from a relatively different background. I use a lot of dog training techniques on myself, actually. I work a lot of dogs that are like bite cases or anything else like that. And I show some of the same aggression arcs that those dogs do. Oh my god, that's why I couldn't do that. But and so like I'll redirect myself, like just because if I like use you as an example, I will go toe to toe with very large dudes. It doesn't trigger me at all. But if like you got real aggressive at me, you can literally physically watch my body language change, and it turns into fuck around and find out. But I can now feel that in my body real quick. Like I can watch my shoulders set, and just as soon as I feel myself roll my shoulders back, I'm like, I am loading to actually like physically harm somebody, and I will just pick it up. And I will tell you that this will roll into yours. I didn't realize how bad I was until somebody tried to pick me up at a 12th night. I was like 19 or something like that, and all fighters have a fun time picking up smaller fighters. Somebody grabbed me from behind. I literally do not remember the next 2 minutes. And luckily, one of my friends was like, whoa, dog that bites, let's go. But like, he picked me up, I fucking pulled, because I had my sacks on, I pulled, and luckily my brain went, friend, not food, and I put the sacks away, and one of my guys said I had white knuckled that thing around. So I don't actually carry a knife in like events like this at all, just because of that situation, where I understand that occasionally I can be a dog that bites, and so I don't ever want to risk anybody. But that's when I was like, it's time for therapy. But I didn't even realize that I was that bad until that occurred, and then I started paying attention to my own body, because there isn't the shutdown mechanism in my brain. It just is like, and now we accelerate. And so my acceleration is I had to become very physically aware of my own body, because there's not like the emotional dump. I don't get the adrenal dump. I don't get that like nervous energy or like shaking or anything else like that. I just go and be like, sweet, I'm now putting you down. And I'm like, okay, we'll learn which tells us are. And so that was a lot of awareness, but that was a lot of also like reading a lot of books on PTSD.
The problem with PTSD is that it's so individualized.
Yes, it really is.
And the responses. So building trust and building a trusting environment starts with being non-judgmental. Okay. You have to be non-judgmental. You're not judging why they got into that situation, why their mindset is where it's at. You are there to support that person, whatever it is.
I found that you don't even have to know the trauma to make them feel valid.
No.
And you don't.
That's the big thing.
In a lot of cases, you're not going to know the trauma for maybe ever, because that's their story to tell, and it's their story to be willing to tell.
That comes with the trust.
That comes
Yeah.
with the trust.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Never
be
feel
aware.
never feel that your trust has been betrayed because they don't open up to you.
That is actually, I'm gonna take that one for just a second. That is the #1 failure that we have as trainers in a combat sport, is we wanna know why, but we don't actually need to get through the problem.
Right.
Don't ever feel like your student needs to tell you why they're having the response. You just need to address the response, and you can easily figure out stuff around it. Don't ever push them for why did this happen. They'll come tell you if they want to.
Be aware that if you are a person with an insecure attachment style, you're probably going to want to find that trauma, participate in that trauma voyeurism as a method of bonding. And if that's your style, you have to be especially
Don't trauma
careful.
bond with your students.
No. Yeah.
I mean, just don't trauma bond
Does
in
everybody
general.
know what that term means?
What's
Anybody
that?
that doesn't know what that term means?
Oh, my, yeah, no.
Oh, go ahead, you got that one.
I'm not that great at clinic. It means that you live through your students or through the other person's trauma with them.
Yeah.
And one of the downsides to that is that it can become a feedback loop to them and to you.
And there is a difference between comparative trauma, where you're like talking about the same thing, and like, so neurodivergent people will compare my stories.
Yeah.
And so I have this story that I will share with you to say, hey, I also understand you, versus much more neurotypical people will be like, wow, I'm very sympathetic about that. And so trauma bonding can look like comparative storytelling. And so you have to watch out for that, because a lot of people will like rebond where, you know, like, if we're exchanging stories and everything else like that, we have to not fall into the loop of, oh my God, are you okay? That's where you start crossing the line into it.
That's why I don't bring it the person is broken, that it's a mindset. Because if you're thinking of the person being broken, then you're trying to fix them. And they don't need fixing. They will fix themselves when and if they're ready to. What your job there is to give them a supportive environment where they can succeed at what they want to do. And what they want to do in the SCA is they want to fight. They want to go out and bond with other people in a combat sport that does trigger them to a point. Because of one reason or another, they either want that bonding or they want to try to address their trauma in some way where they have some control of it.
For me, it took me 11 years before I built enough trust in the people that were around me for me to share what I've gone through. And then it's the other part of what you were saying. It's also a feeling that it's safe here to be that person, to let loose that aggression, to be able to share the experiences we have on the field together, right? So safe is another.
I'd say probably mindful reflection with your student and with yourself plays a large part in that. Post-practice, post-event, post-tournament, etc.
So one of the ways I use to build trust within my fighting practices is that we usually have a debrief after the practice where everybody talks about what other people did on the field, how well they did, things that they liked, things they didn't like, and that's building that communications. And that builds a practice, it builds the people there, and it builds the trusting environment. And you can do it with your students at tournaments when they come off the field, debrief. How did you feel? How did this work? How did that work? It's not just about winning the fight, it's how they felt about, did they have fun? Were they comfortable? I had one student that she wanted to do wars. She wanted to do wars really bad. Okay, we get you an armor. She walked out the war field and she froze. And was just overwhelmed because of her PTSD. She came back in and said, I couldn't do it, I couldn't do it. I said, no, you did. You got your armor on. You walked to the edge of the field. You did it. Okay?
You've ever been.
And that's what you want to focus on, not what they didn't do, but what they did accomplish. That's building that trust, that environment they can live in.
Do you two want to answer on the building trust, and then we've got a couple questions out in the audience.
Yeah, so one of the things for me is in the early stages when I see a student that I'm working with who I catch that panic response, or that I see them escalate, right? One of the biggest things for me is finding ways to acknowledge what happened in a way that isn't publicly broadcasted, right? Basically, I will generally find a reason to just, quietly have a word say, hey, I noticed it looked like you spiked up a little bit there, and then offer them a few options, like, if that happens again and you're having a hard time with it, if you want to just tell me, hey, I need to grab a drink of water, right? I'll know what's going on. You can step out, you can do the thing, you can come back in. If you have other things that you need participation in and you're willing to do that, let me know. If not, cool. But just, look, I saw it happen. It's fine. It's cool. This is normal, right? Normalize that that's a thing that people experience.
Not highlighting it.
Yeah, not highlighting it, not like, hey, look at Joe over there. He's panicking, right? Not, okay, stop everything.
Listen, we're not in the 1980s anymore, okay?
Yeah, not like, okay, everybody has to stop practicing because that person's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But yeah, normalize it, handle it quietly, handle it in a way that, retains dignity. And
supports the person.
Yeah, and just lets them know that they're not alone in that situation.
I will add that
Yeah.
it retains dignity and their identity.
Yes.
PTSD spikes when you feel like you're losing your identity to the
Absolutely.
fear. And
Yeah.
so if we can maintain that dignity and identity of our students, I have found that helps a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of trying to keep the situation as normal as possible. To I don't want to say ignore it, but so that they're not hyper called out by it, which feeds into that self-focusing that a lot of people fall into. Be able to keep going forward and find the tools, whether it's then or apart or in some other situation, that help that person return to normalcy in that situation. Like, hey, do we need to slow down? Do we need to change offhands? Do we need to ever take a water break? Whatever it is, do we need to take 5 and come back? Not in a way that really, like I said, calls attention to everything.
I have a question for y'all. I realize that I've made an assumption in my own practice. How important is consistency, predictability, and ritual for y'all? Like, for me, coming off the field and doing the self-reflection part is vital for me to transition from I'm in this place of action and potential threat to I'm here now.
For me personally, it's very important going into a tournament space. It's much less important coming out of it.
Okay.
I find that I have, if I take the time to ground and center myself, to mentally place myself at the beginning of that process, I'm much less likely to escalate.
To answer your question about training, I think those things, being consistent, being respectful, and having marked traditions, i.e. procedures, are really, really important. Because again, building trust in a training environment means that they need to be able to anticipate what's going to be happening and when and why.
So we've got questions that are starting to come in, so I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names.
No,
Just come back. You've had your hand up a couple times.
Ticina, hi.
So you're number 2.
My question was about the fourth aspect of response. So there's the fight, freeze, but there's fawn. And as someone who pretends to be a confident person, I am, but at the same time, I am, to quote my therapist, I am like manipulative douchebag bait. Like I'm I just am, and I don't mean to be. This is a trauma response I have where with my original night, I was like, sure, you can hit me until I still have permanent dents in my thigh.
Yeah.
Like I can tell you what he did, and that's not okay. But instead of saying like you're hurting me and also hitting on me after practice, which is a whole other discussion to have later. But it's fine. He's a douche.
I am very affronted right now.
Oh no, long story about that, but more about how these patterns of fawn. I am like, you're great, I love you, you're amazing. Even though at the same time, it's also a almost self-mutilation thing of I'm seeking out this person who hurts me.
I got this.
Yeah, and I've done it over, and I had a pattern recently where I did it again out of combat, where this person did the trauma bonding thing of, I see you're hurt, I see you're broken, and I can make you better. It's fine, this person died of fire. We'll talk about it later. But it's still one of those weird ones where I was fucking princess, sorry for cursing, and I'm still in a situation where someone used my deep trauma to just break me. And it didn't even take combat, but how do you as teachers recognize when your student is just fawning the F out of you, where they're not fighting, they're not freaking out, they're like,
I
you're
love
the
this
coolest
question so
person in the
much.
goddamn world. Because that's one I've seen a lot. And a lot of people don't see me as someone who's, well, unless you're on my Facebook and then you know I'm a mess, but they don't see it as fawning. They see it as Geneva thinks you're amazing.
Yeah.
Which I do, but that's because I'm broken.
You need an advocate. So you are not in a place where you can advocate for yourself in this situation. And so having basically like the safety buddy, especially if you decide to go back into a situation where you know that you have fawned before, so a training situation with a bad night, everything else like that, you actually need an advocate that can step in. So I have a squire currently that is mine because I stole him from his other night because I stepped in and was advocating for him. And he was like, holy shit, nobody's ever called me on this before. I'm like, you are a fucked up mess, go to therapy, you shut the fuck up. Like I was savage about this. But in this situation, you actually have a load of trauma that doesn't make you broken, but does make it so you can't really defend yourself. And so the best way, the best tool, is actually bringing in an outside source. So I try to advocate for, actually I've got a bunch of squires that, like, I give 0 fucks about their knight's opinion of me. But like their knight will start doing a little bit of that old school abusive, like you just need to push through, and I'll be like, how about get fucked? Cool, you and I can go fight. Now you're pissed off at me? Cool, you and I can go fight. And to get them out of that cycle. And what I would say is really in this situation, as much as I would like to say, you can do this by yourself, none of us can actually. I didn't get over some of my responses without other friends advocating, being like, hey guard dog, hey, go take a walk. Because like they learned what those behaviors were. I had very open and honest, very trusting conversations with them about like, when you see my shoulders do this, I am going to snap somebody in fucking half. And so they could step in, and they were like, I just programmed them into my brain as like, if they tell me I go walk right then. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so what I'd say is you need a couple friends that can advocate for you, especially in a training environment, so you can relearn behaviors while also having a safety mechanism in place. So they see that happening, and they can come in and check in and like kick you in the ankle and be like, hey little buddy, about turning into Bambi. And you can take a moment to walk away and reassess some of your behaviors, because we can't ID behaviors alone. It's actually one of the big things that we have in building trust and starting to break the cycles. So we have to remember, we live in our own behavior sets. It is very hard to step outside of those and be like, oh, that's a bad cycle. We need somebody to come call us on it.
Didn't even realize.
And so that would be my advice for you, is that a safety buddy is going to be key to breaking this.
And as a trainer, you have to be aware when that's happening. And as I tell my squires, my job is not to show them that I'm a great knight. My job is to show them my clay feet, okay? I will never be a wonderful, great knight. I can try to be, and I will work to be that, but I will never be there. So my job is to show them that's okay not to be there, okay? People should not fawn over me. They should fawn over themselves and their accomplishments. And that is as a trainer and as a knight, that's my job, is to keep pointing out their accomplishments, not mine.
That can also create an odd fawning cycle, just to warn you. Just to warn you, that will cause an odd fawning cycle. That can actually, just you have to make sure that that doesn't cause it also in your student.
Right.
Because a fawn, or somebody that has a fawning response within a system, will degrade further if you're continuing to give them compliments or anything else like that. It actually reinforces the cycle, because then they will start seeking that pattern.
Okay.
And so you have to watch it. So if you have somebody that admits they have a fawning response, you actually have to create boundaries to those responses as a trainer a lot of the time. Because they'll come to you and they, like, that's one of the things you have to establish with them of like, I will compliment to this line, and then we need to have it be like, cool, you did a really good job, like, great steps forward. Like, now let's also do some of the negative feedback, and what it does is it actually breaks that cycle, and so it doesn't turn into a feedback loop of seeking it from you or seeking it for you.
Yeah, nobody's ever seen that good in me before.
Oh man.
I'd like to address that from the reciprocal side. So let's first understand that narcissism is frequently tangled with fawning folk, right? Narcissism is a trauma response that occurs when as far as I know, most frequently in early childhood, the child cannot get their needs met. We're talking from age 0 to 6 months. Sometimes up to 2 years, depending on who you talk to. They create a false world for themselves, one which is survivable. Because in their infant minds, their world is not survivable. I also came across the term nipple panic recently. Anybody heard this term? This is great. This woman was nursing her child and watching this little potato, this top-heavy potato, panic to find a breast to feed. And she realized that in that moment, she was sharing a pain with all mammals of all time. If you don't find someone to meet your needs, you will die. Right? The nipple panic. I've got to find the nipple or I'm going to die. And folks with narcissism suffer that their entire lives. So when a person who fawns interacts with a person with narcissism, both of their deep structures are being activated. If you are a person with narcissism or narcissistic tendencies, I've just outed myself, you'll feel when someone connects to you with fawning. The question is, can you stay mindful and realize this person is being nicer to me than I deserve? I'm not this clever. I'm not this smart.
My bad, am I creating this cycle?
Yeah, and the way around that is boundaries. Boundaries are how we tell other people how to care for us, and consent is how we show that we care. So as an instructor, you have to create boundaries both between interpersonal relationships and educational relationships, and just in the nature of your teaching. You have to say, we're going to teach till 3, right? And then I've got a thing. If you know that person is a fawning person, until that relationship is so well established that there's no chance of crossing those boundaries, particularly if your student or your friend or your mentor can't establish those boundaries for themselves.
Solid.
Leaf had a question too. He was number 2.
Yeah.
And you're right after me.
So I've got a student who likely has PTSD from her family's history, but is not diagnosed. And so related to that, do you have any tips for identifying unidentified PTSD relationships on the field or near the field? Are you aware of any difference in PTSD response based on whether somebody's born in a male or female body? And any recommendations for working with someone who can't afford therapy?
I have a list of books.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff online, and there is online counseling for very low cost. Very low cost.
We actually crowdfunded a friend for like 7 or 8 sessions, and like all of us got together and threw $10 in, and we're just like, hey, we love you enough that this is your therapist that you're going to go see. We already paid for it.
Be careful on deciding that somebody has PTSD without them identifying it to you first. Because there's a lot of, every one of us are individuals. Every one of us have our own responses to every environment. You know, PTSD is a label for a common response to this situation. But, you know, what we're saying about building trust with your students applies to every student.
Can I narrow this question down a little bit from you?
Yeah.
What are some of the responses that you're getting that are giving you the idea this individual might be struggling?
So, one is that she has confided to me situations that I would expect would cause PTSD in her past. She will sometimes come off the field in this sort of and just need to stop. Whether that with often looking like frustration. She's pretty new, so there's some of those elements too. And she has in some situations had what do you call it, the alexithymia response.
Nicely done.
So, yeah.
Be careful, because as a male trainer, you teach as a male to other males. It's easy for us to teach each other. Teaching females is a totally different environment where you have to be observant to their needs. My wife, when she first started fighting, could not hit people. Not because she had suffered trauma, but because she was raised that way.
We might argue on the panel right now.
We might. but we need to think of our mindset different.
So I will
of our students' needs.
I will suggest that you remove male and female from this conversation, and it's, were you raised in an environment with impact sports or combat?
Yeah.
And were you not?
Correct. Yeah.
That is the difference. Is most women do not are raised in a different environment than most men. But I have a giant soapbox about this that is a different class, and so we're just going to.
Remember that I'm 70 years old.
Yep. Oh yeah, no, that's the reason why I was like, I don't think we need to argue, but I was just like, it's, there's a difference, and I would love to see that language change. And so it actually sounds a little bit like your student probably comes from a slightly harder background, which is fine. But also, the first place I would start was, did you do impact sports as a child? Like, maybe they don't actually have what we would consider a normalized adrenal response in the heavy field.
Yep.
Because you'll actually see the arc of new students, especially when we have a new student come in that hasn't been in that, they experience literally more trauma to get good at what we do, like later in life. So their brain isn't developing anymore. They're having to learn how to deal with this on a very conscious level. Versus students that even didn't come from a traumatic background, but like started early in football or wrestling or horseback riding is another one, because man, is that an impact sport. Like earlier on in life, where their brain was still developing, they have a slightly different adrenal response than people that didn't have that until later in life. And so that's actually where I would start, is actually looking at where and how she's responding to the heavy adrenal load in there. And is it just that she's now later in life very consciously dealing with the fact that she's like, why does my body feel like this?
Yes.
Why am I thinking in a different way? Because as a child, we don't have the why. You just do it. You get bucked off the horse, and you go, well, that sucked. And you get back up on the horse, and you're like, well, my body learned how to deal with this. Because you're built to bounce as a child. And as an adult, we're not built to bounce. We have learned mortality. And so that will change a little bit. And also, I feel like you've got thoughts on this.
Yes. Actually, this is in terms of where you wanted to narrow it. I kind of want to broaden it.
Okay.
A tool that I use, regardless of whether we're talking about PTSD or other learned behavior responses, things like this. I find that, and this kind of goes back to the building trust thing too. I find the steps that I go through is I look at what is the pattern I'm seeing, how is that pattern impacting what the student is trying to accomplish, right? And just kind of checking my thoughts and biases around that. And then the way that I will present that conversation to that person is, I am seeing this pattern. It appears to occur in these circumstances, and it appears to be negatively affecting what you are attempting to accomplish in these ways. And then, and this is the most important part, is this something, having put this on the table, is this something you want to address, or is this something you'd like to leave alone for now?
Solid. Consensus key.
He also touched on something else that is really important in training, is knowing what your students' goals are. Why are they there? Why are they putting on armor? That's part of building your trusting environment, is that they know you know what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish. So always, and keep checking back with, because goals change.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed in 40 years of teaching FCA fighting is with your students and your squires and this, always check back and help them gain new goals. Because I've seen so many young squires have the goal to become a knight. And once they reach that, they have no other goals.
Yeah.
And they go away from the FCA.
Oh man, I have so many goals.
But the ones that have goals after becoming a knight, or after accomplishing this, or after accomplishing that, continue to further work towards those goals.
Notice that there is a difference, by the way, between post-traumatic stress disorder, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which present differently and are cared for differently or diagnosed differently. So your student, they may be reacting to being hit, or they may be reacting to the fighter not taking a hit and that being internalized as shame for not doing it correctly. Those are all very different things. Also, the signals for PTSD hit the amygdala long before they hit the conscious brain. So that PTSD response fires long before the rational brain can do anything about it. You cannot think yourself out of PTSD. And it may be, understand that with, thank you, that's very kind of you. With PTSD, if a person is experiencing some of that, because they're experiencing that traumatic event as though it's happening currently, they are getting a full sensory experience. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, internal emotions, all of that, which is very overwhelming. Normally our memories don't come with a full sensory thing. Do you remember where you were on September 11th?
Yes.
Do you remember where you were on September 10th?
Yes. But to be fair, I was homeless, so I have pretty vivid memories of this part of my life. And pregnant.
You're gonna have a lot of memories from that.
Yeah.
But if you're experiencing those memories right now, at the same time as trying to process, am I learning this kata or this form or whatever, that's a lot of overwhelm. And your student might just need the time to process, to let all those chemicals go through their body. So I love what you said about, is this furthering your goal? Is it interfering with your goal? If it's not interfering with their goal, I mean, you might want to check in, but also be aware that there's a lot of shame involved in not being able to stay present.
Yeah, well, and it can also draw that distinction of, right, okay, we have this relationship that's built around these goals.
Yeah.
And, okay, so I notice this pattern, okay, fine, but the pattern isn't interfering with the goal. So I may just say, I may mention that I'm seeing it, but if it's not interfering with the goal, that may not be an us thing.
Yeah, and you are not their therapist.
Oh,
Right.
I was actually just, I was actually just about to hit this.
Yeah.
All trainers, take this away from this panel. None of us, besides that dude right there, is a therapist. Like, we are actually not mental health professionals. This panel is to give you enough tools to keep yourself safe and your students safe as a trainer in a the SCA is neurodivergent capital. The amount of PTSD in this group is insane. Okay, but also
we're just the ones who admit it.
You also, as trainers and as students, part of the thing that trust is being able to hit the line where you're like, I am not a mental health professional, and if you need help, I will get you to it. Like 100%. Do not attempt to be a therapist for anybody. Also for your own sanity.
None of us
And
can
for
be
yourself.
everything that somebody needs.
Yeah.
Yes.
And everybody is
Yeah.
going to need somebody else's help somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have hands pop up. Oh, so you were actually next. So do you guys mind holding for just a moment?
If they're just related, I don't mind waiting until.
No.
Listen, you will give ground constantly as one of your behaviors, and I've watched you do it like 4 times already. So.
Reinforced by someone.
My bad, I'm sorry.
Don't keep around about that.
Oh,
My bad, I did that.
All right, ask your question while they're doing it.
Oh, hi, modern day social worker. I'm just throwing out there that do not put diagnosis on people.
Yes.
Unless they themselves have done it, and even then, be careful, because when you tell them that, depending on what their responses are, like if they're prone to fawning, then they might be like, oh my God, you figured me out. And now that intensifies the situation even more. So avoiding those terms is incredibly important unless they bring it out themselves.
Yes.
and I'd like to add on that too, and check me if you think that I'm out of line here. I never use someone's diagnosis as their identity. I wouldn't call myself a narcissist. I say that I had narcissistic tendencies, so that I am not locked into that identity and I can progress out of it.
Yeah.
One of the things I teach my students, and I try to teach them, is that I'm a big believer in we are what we practice, or we are what we pretend to be.
Yeah.
And the more we pretend to be honorable and chivalrous and courteous, we will become more honorable, chivalrous, and courteous. And the same thing applies to our training abilities. Continue to learn, continue to go out there and seek professional help when you need it. You know, if you've got a student that's having an issue, sit down and talk with a friend that's in the profession that knows a little bit that can help you direct them to more help if they need it.
Practice does not make perfect.
Nope.
Practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
Yep.
And touching back on the, is this something that we want to address or something we want to leave on the table? Limits to what things we want to address means in this relationship. This doesn't mean, oh, hey, it looks like you're having, you know, I see that we're dealing with some PTSD here. Shall we solve that together? No. What it means is we have noticed that when we build a Venn diagram here and we find where the way that these patterns express is interfering with the things you are trying to do, the question is, what can we do so that you, as who you are right now, can better navigate the path to where you are trying, to what you are trying to achieve? How do we build that bridge, not how do we fix your problem? Right?
One of the things in training is to also think about it. Yeah, SCA is neurodivergent capital, but why? Why is the SCA so attractive to people with PTSD, with other issues? It's because the SCA creates a trusting environment. Okay? The premises of the SCA is what you need to have in your fight practice as a trainer. And I call out all nights, if you see a brother night or a sister night or a cousin night or whatever, or a trainer that's doing something that is inappropriate, we need to call them on that. We're not consistent enough in doing that. And that's one of the things that I'm happy to see the younger generation doing more, is calling people out when they need it.
I love our younger generation.
I'm sorry.
Now, granted, the SCA is also neurodivergent capital because it's 37 feral hobbies in a traveling club. We all like to play hockey, and those of us with ADHD like to play hobby pinball.
Right? No.
Oh, that's a cell phone.
It's really walk to this thing, walk to the next thing.
Excuse me, I got 4 meetings in.
Yeah, so we never got back to your question.
Yes. So, hi, I'm Tulia. I have so much trauma.
That I hit like a brick. Asshole.
I have childhood trauma from being abused by a parent, and then I married a narcissist. And my trauma response is fawning, so it was such a fun relationship. And so I have a lot of trauma from that. He was a very loud, very aggressive person, and we also had kids. And so there was also a lot of, one of our kids specifically was very much of the current generation and would, you know, F you, and the response from the spouse was disproportionate, so there was a lot of intervening and stuff. So the way it impacts me as a heavy fighter, like, even though I know all of this, I'm a school psychologist, so that's like my job, is one, I really struggle with hitting hard enough because I don't want to make them mad at me because then they'll hurt me. And the other one is the fawning response really kicks in. More often during practice, because during tournaments, like the adrenaline comes up and I'm like, I have to keep going. But with practice, it's, they make an aggressive gesture or move towards me, and my shield arm comes up and I do this. And I'm down to 50% of the time closing my eyes instead of 100%, like it was a year ago, but it's still not super helpful for learning things while you're practicing.
But you're taking those steps, and your trainer should be helping you take those steps.
Do you have a trainer?
Sort of. I have a friend who's a knight, and sometimes he's at practices. But the guys in my barony are always really good. Like, they noticed, only 2 other guys showed up last Sunday, but they noticed that I was not hitting very hard. And Sir Tankard, huge monster mountain of a guy, just kind of stood there and made me hit him over and over again.
So that's actually what I was going to say. It actually sounds like, because of your trauma load, and it's just, is you might need to take things in smaller steps. So you can, we call it like the victory conditions, in creating much smaller victory conditions so you can start reprogramming some of that response. We're like, it's okay to hit hard enough. Cool, do it out of armor. Like, have one of your friends, probably actually a guy, so you can do a little bit of like, I can hit a guy hard enough, but take off some of the other stress. Putting on your helmet is a load of stress that we deal with. Like, putting on your armor is also. It's different loads on the body, and so if we can remove some of those and then get to some of the root problems, like, cool, you're not hitting hard enough? Well, cool, let's go do mechanics practice where you get up to that, and once you're comfortable with that and not having some of that first, like, okay, like, are they gonna be mad, is then put on your body armor and do it. Don't put on your helmet, just your body armor. Or just your leg harness, or just a little piece, or add some footwork in, but it's the small steps and stages, and it can be very frustrating, because like, you're like, I wanna just go do the thing. I would like to be okay and go do the thing. But realistically, you already know this with kids, sometimes it's like literally like, it's okay to go get a glass of water. Like, just go do that, and we're gonna repeat this until you're okay again.
And when you've got a student that needs that, include other students in that.
Only if they tell you yes.
What I mean, though,
Only if they tell you yes.
If you're running a hitting drill, let's say. Okay? Don't single out one person to run that drill. Run the entire practice running that drill. Okay? So the person doesn't feel singled out. Normalizing it.
That's come up a few times.
I want to point out,
That's what
I'm glad you pointed out, because almost all trauma revolves around being restrained or restricted in some way, whether that's physically or verbally or mentally or emotionally restrained. And so removing that helmet, removing other armors, pieces that are restricting your body, is going to have a huge effect on the way that you're perceiving. It's a really good idea to take the helmet off.
It also changes the neural pathways too.
Yes, absolutely.
And I can't see with it on.
That's a big thing for a lot of folks.
Is your visor removable?
It's not. I'm having a new one made. That does.
What, nothing feels better than new clothes and new armor, especially when it's for you and it's bespoke? It's the best.
So one thing I'd like to touch on is the thing of wanting to just immediately be there, right? This is one of those things, a lot of us grew up with, in environments where, to one degree or another, and there was thin praise for success and significant penalty for failure.
1 through 99 was not acceptable.
Right,
It was
yeah.
100% or you were
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, second place is first loser, yeah.
Yep.
Right, and so that tends to lead to, if I'm not already there, I'm in trouble, right? And that tends to lead to, that tends to lead to, I just want to skip to the part where I'm good, right? And that impatience to just be winning all the things now. And that's a huge thing, and that is very frequently tied in with a lot of these anxiety spikes, I mean, that could be just a huge trigger. And as instructors, this is one of the reasons, one of the areas where we need to be hugely proactive about what victory conditions are. We need to be very proactive about articulating our expectations. One of the things I really try to do is stress over and over again, oh, hey, okay, yes, I know we've been working footwork for the last 6 weeks, and today we're going to be working a blade work thing. I expect that your footwork is going to go to crap while we do this.
Yup.
This is going to happen. I don't care, right? I'm not focusing on that, and you shouldn't either. This is what we're focusing on, and let's be very real about expectations. Let's be very real about what we're trying to accomplish and what we're considering success, so that we can start building those things. I have a t-shirt that I had custom made that I wear to practice, and sometimes it says, failure is not an option, it's a requirement.
Ooh, that's solid.
Right?
Yeah.
If you are never doing it wrong, if you're never screwing it up, you aren't learning anything, right? But that goes right counter to that second place is first loser thing, and it's a huge block that I guarantee most of us have had to really spend a lot of time
Who all
on.
did that hit home for? Yeah, can we do it? So that hit me hard. Can we do a thing? Take a deep breath and put your hands in the air. And let it down slow. Gonna do it again. One more time.
So if you do it, expand your ribs this way?
Yep. Yeah. And here's an interesting thing too, if you want to try it another time. Sometimes we think about expanding the breath as the motion, but you can also think about it as pushing the exhale out and letting it recover naturally, which is the opposite way. Makes your brain think about it and reconnect. Thanks, I appreciate that. I was starting to get a little twitchy.
So if you have a fun one, here's one for you. This is from my physical therapist. When we are panicking in flight or fight mode, we breathe at the top of our lungs. When we're actually breathing, the reason why you put your arms up is you can't expand the top of your lungs. It expands your rib cage, so just make sure you're expanding your rib cage, and you can sit there and you can do it very quietly. Yeah. You can actually teach your students how to do this when they're having a panic attack. The reason why they tell you to put your arms in the air, you cannot breathe up at the top of your lungs. Fight or flight mode, so you are canceling it out by putting their hands up. It also stops the pain response, by the way.
We have a question all the way in the back.
Yeah, so we've got a couple questions. So I've seen a hand in the back here. Raven, I saw your hand.
I just had a silly, stupid little thing. At some point when Gregorio is teaching me, basically, I've been working with him for the last year. Some stupid little thing I started saying to myself, mostly just as a quick little to help me feel better about not immediately doing something perfect, which I feel like I have a tendency of doing, is very, very sarcastically, what? I'm not good at this thing that I've never done before? It makes me feel a little bit better about not immediately getting something perfect. Not like that's immensely helpful, but as a quick little thing at least.
I actually love that.
Yeah.
And it's not stupid.
Yeah, that's not stupid at all.
So we have one in the back, and then do you still have yours? Okay, cool. So we've got 1 and then 2. Are you guys good with that?
So I have, my PTSD is a flight response. I have dropped my sword and run away. I have locked myself in a vehicle for 30 minutes. So my question to you guys is, when I come back to the field, because eventually I do wander back, I am extremely embarrassed, I am extremely shameful, and I am waiting for everybody to kind of, you know, go, oh, look at, you know, Theodore ran away, or oh, look, Theodore did this thing. So my question is, how do you help students or even fighters in general that kind of come wandering back and want to get back on the field but are embarrassed to do so?
I ignore their embarrassment.
I praise the acknowledgement. So you're running when you're scared, right?
Yep.
I think that's awesome. You knew what you needed and you did it. And look at you taking care of yourself. That's awesome. That's awesome. You took yourself out of a dangerous situation where you could have been a danger to yourself and also a danger to someone else. Right? If you weren't ready to fight and you kept fighting, that could cause danger. That could cause damage to them. You took care of yourself, and that's what I would highlight.
I try to quietly acknowledge their strength in overcoming their fear, and then put them right back on the field where they want to be. It doesn't need to be a big thing, just a quiet acknowledgement.
So 2 things that I do. One, at the beginning of any, so I tend to run, at practice I tend to run a bit of a training session first and then have everybody doing things. And one of the things I always stress around that training session is that it is always okay for people to rest when they need to sit out when they need to walk out when they need to, and to come back when they're able to, right? I always stress that every time, that that's okay for any reason, whether it's, wow, I felt a little lightheaded, or hey, I needed a drink, or wow, that was a fun panic attack, or you know, any reason, or just,
all of those have in common that they're in the moment. Right? That a person is in the moment if they can recognize that, and that is the goal of grounding for PTSD.
And then, so if a person steps out, when they come back in, if they've had to remove themselves from the environment so they haven't been keeping up with what's going on, then my method for bringing them back in is to address that as, oh, hey, cool, you're back. All right. Do you want to join in drills? Would you like me to walk you through what the class is going through? Right? Normalize it, fold them back in, and then afterward, when things break up and it's a little easier to do one-on-one, if it looks like there was some distress there, just a hey, I'm glad you came back. Are you doing all right?
Acknowledge their return, acknowledge their willingness to return without highlighting it. There's a line.
I want to make sure that, because I may have misspoken a little bit, it's not the taking yourself out part that I'm praising, it's the noticing that you needed to part. If your response is fight, and your stress is so you beat the hell out of a lot of people, I'm not going to praise that. But I will notice that you wanted to, and so you sat out.
Yeah, I would always rather have a person, step out, do what they need to take care of themselves, than have them feel like they have to punish themselves through the rest of the session.
So I'm going to throw something at you. If I need to walk back there, or if you need to go walk after I throw this at you, I'm totally I'm opting this. You want to know how you get over shame and embarrassment? Ask yourself whose voice that is. Because I guarantee you it's not yours. It's somebody in your past that told you, and if you listen to them for a moment, go tell them to get fucked.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Yeah, but that's where shame and embarrassment exists. We are taught to be shamed and embarrassed. As children, we are not embarrassed to fail. We are not embarrassed to try new things or anything else like that. Somebody in your life taught you to be shy, taught you to be embarrassed, taught you that you weren't worthy. Those voices are not yours in your head. figure out whose they are, and tell them to get fucked, a victim.
So, sorry, I'm gonna sound like a panelist, which I didn't really want to be, but I apologize if I do.
You should have been.
But one of the things I really try to do is use the word acceptance. Accepting where you are right now, wherever it is, accept it, find a way to move forward. So that the first part of that is always to accept it. So it's like, what's going on there? It's like, or even when you're starting to roll your shoulders, it's accepting where you are at that moment and being, okay, this is what it is. I'm about to punch this person and literally go to jail. Okay, accept that and then find a way forward, right? But so as trainers, accepting that person's situation as it is now means you're not judging them for it, which means you're not critiquing them for it, which means you're not trying to even improve it, because that's a form of judgment. Is, okay, this is what's going on for you right now. Okay. And just saying that to yourself and saying that to them, I found has really helped bridge that trust, build that trust, and then allows them to also go, oh, because what you just said, there's that voice, somebody put that shame into them. So you don't be that person, right? Just being, okay, what happened? Okay. And saying that, and they go, and you take the breath. Watch them take the breath, right? And then now what do we do, right? And so just having that, and then giving that safe space to move forward. And that's what I was talking about, like, would you guys like to find your own way forward as a person with the PTSD? Do you like somebody else to help you? Even like, maybe like, because I've noticed a few people have used shortcuts. That's what I call them, shortcuts. Be like, so if you're really stressed out, you're gonna say, I'm gonna go for water. That's my shortcut to tell you, hey, I'm stressed the fuck out. I'm about to kill somebody, so I'm gonna go away for a few minutes. That's your shorthand, or a shortcut to it. So do you guys like to do those yourself? Do you find that's empowering, or do you like to have somebody help you with it because they can see the forest in the trees?
Listen, this is hyper-independence over here.
Yeah, I know.
So I was actually going to bring this up is one of the things I want to after this one is touch on what do we do as trainers when we accidentally run into somebody's trauma and how do we care for them in that situation. So I just want to put a sticky note that I would definitely like to touch on that after this one if you guys are all cool with that. I figure out what my students need. So I have a student that has a load of PTSD. He was a kid who grew up in the SCA. His original knight told him he could only fight in minimums. And then he got the shit knocked out of him by a bunch of dukes as a kid. And I, in the car, didn't even mean to do it. And we're like driving along, he's talking about like some of his responses in the fight. And I have his permission to talk about this, by the way. Driving along, and I look at him like, hey, have you ever addressed the PTSD you have about fighting dukes? And like, it's probably like associated with your childhood. And he was just like, whoa! Lower your voice, what? And I was like, and pulled the car up. Do you need to walk around the car while we're in the middle of the desert? Because I feel like I just dropped a bomb on you, my bad. I know you knew. And so he's actually learned, and this is where this arcs back to yours, and he's learned that if I'm on the sidelines, I can coach him through it. And so he wants to be the person that's like, he needs the outside handling of it. And he has created his own shortcuts into and is doing, I am so proud of this dude. Like, I cannot be more proud of him for how he's dealt with this. But he also at some points will say, I got this, or I don't. Yep. And then that's when I step in and be like, cool, we can see through the trees, and you're here as a group. Or like, he very much so has a tell that he can tell me, I'm okay, but I need to do this alone right now. And so that's actually something that I talk with all my students about, and like anybody I'm training with actually is like, can we figure out a word or an action or something else like that when you need to be seen while you're processing your trauma, and like have somebody there with you, so you need your safety buddy or anything else like that, or can we have a signal that says, GTFO, I got this. Because there's definitely times, and this is built around my own trauma. This is flat out from me learning how to deal with my own trauma, is there are times where I'm a dog that bites and I need a handler. And I really would like a handler, and that'd be great, because then my friend can be like, hey, I'm the voice on your shoulder right now, don't eat the person. Can we not? Because you would look terrible in orange. And then there's other times where I'm like, I got this, because if somebody tries to come and handle me, they're gonna turn into the target. And I don't need that, but I know that like, a little voice in the back of my brain that says, go the fuck away, because you're gonna eat somebody. And so we have actually developed that language, and all my students have different tells, and they all have different things, but that's one of the burdens that I take on as being their trainer, is I ask them for that trust when they're ready to give it to me. And so that's what I'd say, is like, realistically, it comes down to each person and the situation, but like a little tell or a little saying or something else like that will give them the option of inviting you in so you can be there, or saying, not yet. And everybody needs that. Either come here or go the fuck away.
And it gives them the power to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to empower everybody
Gives
in
them
their
the choice.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to. And that's it, back to building trust. They need to make the choice for themselves. Leith, you had your hand up?
Yeah. I realized something that came up in conversation a few minutes ago was actually concerning me, not from a PTSD standpoint necessarily. As a person with ADHD rejection sensitivity, when we're talking about the importance of calling people out when they're causing harm, like, I know that I have done more than my share of fucking up in the past and been called out for it. It's important that we call people out with compassion, because the act of calling someone out can itself be a trigger. And we need to have that understanding of yes, I need to call this person out because they might be causing harm to somebody, but I need to make sure that I'm not causing harm when I'm doing this. And to treat this person with understanding and to know that maybe they don't know that they're doing something wrong, or maybe they're just not thinking about things the right way and need that sense of, need to feel safe in order to be able to address the problem.
All behavior makes sense in a certain context. It doesn't all make sense in one context. So figuring out the context of that behavior is critical if you're trying to call somebody in.
I think this goes back to, there's a thing that's been cropping up a little bit here and there, the concept of appropriate scale of response. Right? If we are in a situation where person A is doing a thing that is putting person B in immediate harm, right? Then the scale of response that is appropriate is pretty high, right? Number one goal is preserve person B. If person A has at one point in the past behaved in a way that has caused harm to person B, the need to address that behavior may still be present. The scale of response is not the same. We're not going to like tackle that person to the ground and drag them off the field just because we saw them and that thing happened however long ago. Well, I mean, I'll make exceptions for that, but
let's be aware that that's not merely physically tackling them and dragging them off, but it can also be metaphorically as well.
And there are so many nuances to that thing. But yes, in general, are we addressing this are we addressing the behavior, or are we trying to address the person, right? Are we actually making the problem worse in the way that we address it? And a lot of us who have trauma or traumatic pasts don't necessarily always have the most appropriate scale when we...
I need you to lower your voice. That was at me.
There's a scale.
May I ask a question? Yes, all dragons have scales.
I come on this from a very different side of things, in that, you know, when Valentine is having issues at home, I can tell him to put on his running shoes and get the hell out of my house and come back when he's fit to be around people. Or, you know, when somebody has squeaked, dropped their swords and run away, I go out in my yard, I pick them up, set them where they're safe, and I tell everybody, no, she'll be back when she's ready. But when it's somebody that I don't know that well, as a marshal on the field, how can I be supportive within my role?
Oh man, my snarky answer is squirt bottle. No. You got a bad response.
No.
You paying attention to me now?
No. That is absolutely my trigger. I don't do it in cold water and I won't see anything for several minutes.
That's the worst thing to do on the planet.
If it's really hot, you know, we'll talk about it.
My response to that is that I think the answer to that is in the definition of the role of a marshal. The role of a marshal, your first responsibility is safety on the field, right? So what is going on with this person interacting with safety on the field? That is, and again, my go-to when I'm not sure how to handle a situation like this and I'm winging it is going to be how do we, you know, if I'm in a marshal role, how do we maintain safety on the field and how do we maintain dignity on the field, right? And so a lot of that is going to be we want to de-escalate the situation if that's necessary, get people to go, hey, do you need to take class?
Yeah, I was going to say, offer autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, autonomy. Also, I will say in this conversation, if you are in a situation where you are not comfortable de-escalating the situation, bring somebody else in.
Yeah.
Like that's actually the biggest thing is even as marshals, your number one responsibility is for you to walk away off that field too.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about PTSD episode, there's a reason why people grab me because I have very real concerns around safety actually naturally. But like I have the voice that tends to get through a lot of our military guys. And so they know they cannot safely de-escalate, so they find the next person that can de-escalate, even if it leaves the situation going for a moment. Because had they stepped in, they would have then become the target. And so that's the thing that I would say is when you know somebody and they're on the field and you see something going on where a marshal's about to step in, you can volunteer. And say, hey, I know this person, I can help this de-escalate, you know, trying to make sure that they keep their autonomy and everything else in the process. But also, feel free in the same manner is to be like, I don't actually know this person or why they're having this response. I need somebody who does. Or I need somebody with less care for their arm possibly getting broken than me.
And if you're the marshal on the field, call hold. That stops everybody. Everybody's trained on a hold to stop. And it doesn't matter why the hold is called. You call hold and then you walk over to the head marshal and give the fighters and the people involved that moment.
Remember, I just call a water break. Call water. Everybody needs water. It's too hot today. And just disengage everybody from the situation.
This reminds me of, I only know it from dialectical behavioral therapy as tip skill, and I'm sure it has a different name. If anybody knows it, please throw it out. To interrupt an activation, right? Not a pattern behavior, but an activation, like it's something critical. A shock of some kind. We talked about was it swim response, putting your face in cold water. Is the way to interrupt it, but you must immediately follow it up with some other behavior that's different than what was happening. So you can offer water, spray, suggest they spray it on their face, and then engage them in a conversation about something else. And that can defuse that moment. It's not going to fix the day, it's not going to fix the problem, but you can defuse that powerful moment.
And pulling a little bit from once upon a time earlier in my life, I did a lot of direct care work. And with which involved a lot of folks who, for various reasons, were prone to escalation and in many cases violent escalation. If I have two people that are interacting and one of them is in escalation and is being aggressive, I am going to I am almost always going to move to interact with the person that they are targeting. I am not going to try to counter the person who's escalating. I'm not going to try to counter the person who's becoming violent. I'm going to interact with their target, and I'm going to disengage their target. Right?
So this brings up a really good one for trainers. Handling somebody's PTSD may kick off your own. Okay, so we're going to talk about that real quick. Is in a de-escalation situation, especially if we have some large guys that come out of the military, they can escalate very, very quickly, and you turn yourself almost into the target once you get their target to safety. Guess what? You also need to take the time afterwards to not turn that into your own trauma. Like, go find your pack of people, process it out. Because if you don't, it is going to crop up in the weirdest ways possible. This goes for any time you have that. If you're removing somebody from a SA situation or anything else like that, remember you must also self-care. Otherwise, you are walking down the same path they are. You are not a disposable resource, and never treat yourself as such.
Yeah. Anytime you have to intervene in a situation like that, you have to check in with yourself afterward.
Also, if you're on the sidelines and a trainer or somebody is intervening and they ask you for support them.
Yes.
If you're the autocrat or the steward for an event and somebody that's intervening says, call the police.
Just do it.
Just do it. Don't matter what embarrassment. I was at a war back in the 80s and we had a PTSD incident going on. I talked this gentleman down 5 different times, and he needed to be removed from the situation. I told the event steward 4 times, call the police. They didn't want to do it because it embarrassed the SCA.
Call the cops.
Call the cops.
Sorry.
Okay? The only way people get help sometimes is with severe intervention. And he came back 2 weeks later and thanked me for it. Okay? But support the person that's doing the intervention.
So we got 10 minutes left. Do any of you guys have any specific questions for a panelist or anything else that you want brought up? I realize we have been all over the place. I can probably guarantee you every panelist here would be willing, and you can tell me to F off, to continue this conversation one-on-one. I would like to say thank you all very much. You are all very well spoken. You should talk more. You have a shit ton of info. And so, like, please feel free to continue these conversations.
Just a request that people who have recommended books and online resources, please share them in some form.
Where would you guys actually like me to share them? I have literally a library on this.
Probably on the page for this event.
Yeah,
Facebook on the site.
I'll make sure it's archived so people can see
Nicholas,
it.
can you text me? My ADHD is gonna like go right out the window because I gotta go teach a class after this and just post my book list.
Post your what?
Book list.
Book list, thank you.
Yeah, and online resources too.
Yeah.
I just had one, I come from a massage background as well, and a big thing in that is that you're coming in for a massage, but the first 20 minutes or so, your body has to get used to it. I can't throw elbows to start with. You'll ask me to, and your body will just tense up more and more, and I will be battling you for however long it takes. So that, much like with adult intimate situations, there's prep before you do the thing. There is the thing you did, and then there's aftercare. And sorry for my mind with like kink terminology for this, but the same applies. Like you're consensually saying, "Yo, hit me with something." You need to have that. And some people get too nervous, like I have to go fight, and then they can do slow work, and then they can go back to fighting again, and then afterward. But remembering that your body needs time to get used to this. You need time in your armor to get used to it. That's why something like slow work can be good. Or even just walk around and shoot the shit while you're in your armor, because your body needs to get used to that feeling. And if you don't ease into it, it's really uncomfortable in all the metaphors I'm using. And that aftercare can have that discussion of, oh, I did not do enough prep work and I'm chafing. And that could be literally, I didn't put my armor on right, or I'm so sorry.
No, this is the best way to end this panel. I'm fucking loving this so much.
But it's so true. Like, if you want to have fun with this person again, if you want to have that very intense physical intimate contact again, you want it to be fun. And I really feel like, you know, having those traditions of going out and getting a beer after practice, it's not just, it's about the camaraderie, but it's also about that, talking about the fights, talking about what happened, and it can really change how you perceive it, but you need that work in. And I know that, like, at least in my local practice, they don't do that. It sucks. I've been working on it from behind the scenes. I was like to yell at my husband to take your blood here, go do something. But really thinking about, you don't want to just jump in, you do want to work up to it. And it's so important for your body, for your mind, and it allows that adrenaline, it allows you to get into it. So if that's my...
Ritual exists for a reason.
Yeah.
Anything else before we release you all to the wild?
This side of the room has been very quiet. No, they know everything.
So, I know that I would love feedback. If there's anything you guys would like me to change in how I'm presenting the information, I would love to get feedback, because the only way we can get better as teachers is to get feedback from the people that had to listen to us for 2 hours.
Everybody get feedback all the time.
Yeah, so
Don't
please
ever
feel free,
stop
if there's
taking
anything
feedback.
that you feel that I either glossed over or did, I would love to get some.
And if I punched anybody's triggers, I apologize. Because it happens.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate
As the
you being able to do it.
administrator, I do have to run. I want to thank the panelists for coming very far away. This was a very informative panel. Thank you guys so very much, and we hope to see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.